Hi, I'm Mark with Crown & Caliber, and welcome to Hidden Gems. There are some watches we call hidden gems because they take a second or third look to understand what's going on there. And there are some that are hidden gems because they were literally hidden. This is the Zenith Chronomaster El Primero Revival Manufacturer Edition. So let's get into it. The Zenith El Primero is a legendary movement, and the history of it is rich, and it's talked about the attic and all of the stories that go along with it. But first we should go back to 1969. They come out with the first automatic chronograph movement, along with the same year Tag Heuer and their consortium and Seiko. It's really the El Primero movement that is the modern automatic chronograph. It's the one that all others want to be. In '62, Zenith wanted to start work on the El Primero movement, an integrated automatic chronograph, and they thought they'd have it out by '65. But this is a very hard thing to put together. So it really wasn't until 1969 they came out with it. And that was the same year that Seiko also came out with the first quartz movement, the beginning of the quartz crisis. And this leads to just pandemonium across the Swiss watch industry over the next 2 decades. Zenith really owes the current existence to the El Primero movement, and primarily when it got a second life just at the end of the quartz crisis thanks to the Rolex. But that story of how it got there is really the story of one really important person, Charles Vermot. He is the head architect of the El Primero. He is an engineer and watch movement designer, and this was his baby. He knew that this was a movement that was built to last, a movement that could last 50 years or more like it has. Unfortunately, it did come out in 1969, the same year as the quartz, so it didn't last too long before Zenith was running into financial difficulties, and they were bought out by none other than Zenith, the American radio and television manufacturer. So Zenith America bought Zenith Switzerland. And with that, Zenith USA was looking to get into the quartz watch movement. They were looking to do what other manufacturers were doing, is work with Swiss or Japanese counterparts to bring out new electronic movements and quartz movements. They didn't see a future for the mechanical movement, and they went to Zenith Switzerland and said, since we're not going to keep this, take all the tooling, take all the presses, take everything you have, trash it, sell it, get rid of it. We don't need it. We need the room to set up the new manufacturing. We don't want this stuff. It is junk and useless. And they told this to the head of the watchmaking department. They told it to Charles Vermot, who is, first thought is, how dare you think this? This is my baby. So Charles Vermot sent a letter to Zenith USA saying that the mechanical chronograph will come around. What is once was in fashion will come again. The whims of fashion change, and it will come back, and it is a mistake to get rid of the mechanical chronograph. And Zenith USA basically replied saying, you're just being sentimental. This is not the future. And with that being what it was going to be, there's nothing that Charles could do to change their mind. He did what any sensible person would do and volunteered to get rid of it himself. And in getting rid of it, what he actually did was he called up his brother, and at night, for months, they took the tooling, took it outside of the Zenith building, went around the corner to another building they had, went up a couple flights of stairs into an attic that nobody was using. He slowly, with the help of his brother, moved every single tooling part, 150 different presses that were each for a different part of the chronograph, that each were worth about 40,000 Swiss francs back in 1975. He also took the plans. He took every little bit that he could find to help build the chronograph again in the future. He is an engineer and a watchmaker first, and he thinks like that. So the attic is actually a storehouse that is labeled, orderly, Everything is set up to be easy to find, to get the tools back in working order. And just in case he wasn't around, he even created a large instruction booklet of exactly how to take everything, put it back together, create the tooling process, and know how to make the El Primero again. And then sealed it away. Literally, behind it, when he was done, he walled off the attic so nobody could find it and nobody could destroy what he put there. And then told nobody about it. There were rumors and legends because it took so long and so many nights to do this that he was up to something, or he might be hoarding something personally, some instructions, but nobody had a clue. And that's 1975. A few years later, Zenith USA realizes Zenith Switzerland wasn't making quartz watches to begin with. It was not their expertise, and they were kind of wasting money with this. Come 1985, Rolex is looking to change their fortunes. They are almost 2 decades behind the industry in creating an automatic chronograph for their Daytona. The Daytona is not a very popular watch at this time. Part of that was it was not automatic. It was 2 decades behind. It's not quartz, it's not automatic, it's a manual wind. It's a watch stuck in the 60s and we're in the 80s. So they decide we need to create the automatic version of this. But there's kind of a problem. That's expensive. So they want to eventually get their own movement, but they want somebody to help them in between, to bridge the gap. So they start asking around Switzerland, where does somebody have movements? Does somebody have something we can use? And there's only one real answer out there, and it is a heck of a movement to begin with, and that's the El Primero. That leads to the biggest problem. Zenith can't make the El Primero. They don't have the tooling, they don't have the know-how anymore. But one of the engineers there had an idea. They go, I remember the stories about Charles doing something with the plans. Like, I've heard the legend. So he brings Charles to the factory and they have a meeting and say, hey, you help build the El Primero. Do you have any plans? Do you have anything that can help us bring back this movement so that we can try and sell it to Rolex and bring back our watch manufacturing? And Charles must have been a very happy person that day. Basically listened to all of this and went, hold my beer. Took everyone outside, around the corner, back to the other building, up the staircase, went to the wall and said, here you go. Broke the wall. He had saved all the tooling necessary, all the plans necessary. He saved everything. Blew everyone away, suddenly realizing, oh my God, we can do this. This is how important it was. Rolex was offering a contract for 10 years worth about 7 million Swiss francs. What Charles saved was 150 presses to create all the movements that cost 40,000 Swiss francs each. That 7 million would have just paid for the tooling. They would have never made money. They could never have done it. Zenith could not have built the El Primero from scratch again for Rolex. The only reason they got in the Daytona was because they already had the tooling. They could not afford to replace it otherwise. Charles Vermot saved Zenith. Not only just saved Zenith and the movement, but it might have saved the Daytona because Rolex was able to now bring it to a modern standard, make an automatic chronograph, keep the similar proportions of what they already had. It already looks like the Daytona. But now it's become more modern. Now that it stands out a little more, this is the first Daytona to really become popular. It is part of the whole revival of Swiss watchmaking as a luxury item. The El Primero and the Daytona go hand in hand in saving each other. There's a lot of watch companies that come down to a person or a name, and for Zenith, it's really Charles Vermot. And let's take it one step further of how it also relates to this specific watch. In 2018, they decided we should really go in that attic and see what else is in there. And one of the things I come across is a small little box with a couple of dials in them, including prototype dials. And instead of having the light gray, blue dial that we're used to seeing, it's become kind of a standard of the El Primero, it had 3 different blues in the dial. And it is beautiful. And I kind of wish it was the original dial because I think it looks better, but the good news is Charles also saved those. And when that was discovered, Zenith had to take the chance to say, hey, look what else he saved. And for the 50th anniversary of the Zenith El Primero, they put it in this watch to show you not just where the watch has come from in 50 years, but really where it even began. It's a beautiful watch, it's a beautiful dial, but more than anything else, this is a love letter to Charles Vermot, the man who really saved Zenith. And for me, that's what makes this watch a hidden gem. Hope you enjoyed learning about the legend of Charles Vermot and what he did with the Zenith El Primero. If there's any other cool stories you think we should dig more into, let us know in the comments. See you next time on Hidden Gems.